Good morning, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you for the welcome. Now, this is the second year that I've been invited to speak to you as Chief Inspector of Probation, and I'm delighted you've asked me back for seconds. And I'm grateful to Ben and the team for inviting me. I've always valued Napo's advice and input in my work as Chief Inspector. Now, last year, I started by saying a huge thank you for the work that you all do, and it's essential that I do so again. The work that probation staff carry out can be hard, sometimes hidden, and too often thankless. It is an area that often fails to get the attention or the applause that it deserves. But you will always get my thanks and applause. We owe probation staff an enormous debt of gratitude. The work of probation is crucially important to reducing reoffending, turning lives around, and keeping communities safer. However, everybody here and in the field continues to work under unprecedented pressure and to face massive, some might say constant change, which undoubtedly impacts upon your ability to do the job well. I fear you may all sometimes feel that you're on a spinning funfair ride, which may be appropriate given the fact that we're at the seaside. Now, when I last spoke to you, we were all awaiting the conclusions of the David Gauke review on sentencing. The government responded to his findings in May, and of course the bill is now in Parliament. I said that the bill represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity, but opportunities need to be seized. If this opportunity is to succeed, there must be significant additional investment, nurturing and, dare I say, care of probation. The reforms will fail unless that happens. Having seen the bill, I believe that the jury is still out on whether it can deliver the opportunity that the review presented. We need to ensure that we give our probation service a fighting chance of succeeding, and I've been working to scrutinise the numbers beneath the bill. Last year I said that our probation service has too few staff with too little experience managing too many cases, and that still remains the case. Indeed, I would say it's probably got worse. Has the sentencing bill done enough to prune the workload of probation to ensure it's able to make the maximum impact? My question for politicians and Parliament is not what do we want the probation service to do, but what can it do within its current resourcing envelope? I've made that point to ministers, I've made that point publicly, and I will continue to do so. We need realism. I hope that parliamentarians pay very close attention to this as the bill progresses through Parliament, in the Commons and in particular the House of Lords. I would encourage people to look at the impact assessment, and I will continue to urge government to make the right choices. If we had more probation staff managing fewer cases, we would undoubtedly see better results and better morale. However, there are also detailed parts of the bill which need scrutiny. I would suggest the bill may not go far enough in reducing the length of licence periods. The Criminal Justice Act 2003, the Offender Rehabilitation Act 2014, drastically changed the number of people being supervised by the probation service and the length of that supervision. Those acts fundamentally moved the probation service from one focused on delivering community sentences to one supervising people after release. I think there is a good case for recalibration. As Chief Inspector, I'm wholly unconvinced on the proposal to name and shame those completing community sentences. This is an action that moves away from delivering justice and delivering change, but instead risks pushing people away from the rehabilitative work we know that can be successful in reducing crime and rebuilding lives. We need to rebuild people's ties to the community, not ostracise them. When I was on a recent inspection, I saw some really impressive work that had been undertaken by people on unpaid work at the heart of their local community, undertaking worthwhile activity to make a neglected piece of land into a community space. I was told that the men that had done that work were proud of their work and had taken their children to see the fruits of their labour. I cannot imagine how they would feel if their names and their photographs were published outside that piece of work. We need to nurture people's pride rather than shame people. Now, whilst I support in principle action to limit the size of the recall population, according to the latest numbers, 15.5% of the current prison population is taken up by recalled prisoners, and 40,000 people were recalled last year. 10 years ago, it was 7% of the prison population. But we need to be sure we're dealing with the causes of the issue on recall, not the symptom. If not, there is a danger, I fear, that we may speed up the revolving door. I fear that the primary cause of the recall issues are an exaggerated fear of serious further offences, which in numerical terms has not changed significantly for well over a decade, and the fact that the probation service is under incredible pressure and we are unable to provide people with the support they need after release. We also know that people who are going to prison with problems such as drug abuse, mental health issues, are not receiving the help they need in custody. So when they're released, unsurprisingly, things start to go wrong. I've also voiced reservations about the prominence being given to extending electronic monitoring. Electronic monitoring has its place, but my question is always this: what does the evidence tell us? We should tag the right people for the right reasons. In the long term, we will achieve more by ensuring we have more probation staff working with people than putting a tag on somebody's ankle. We'll achieve more if we have proper support in the community rather than creating tripwires for people. Unless used with full, electronic monitoring can be a blunt tool for a complicated and nuanced job. Whilst policy is of course a matter for ministers, and the law obviously needs to be decided by Parliament, I will continue to counsel ministers on their choices. To aid understanding, I am planning to look at electronic monitoring as part of our thematics programme next year, allow us to explore in detail a topic we last reviewed some 5 years ago. We also know that much of the work needed to get the probation service functioning as it should is about the organisation itself, its morale, its culture. In May of this year, we saw the Rademacher Review, which looked at the organisational culture within HMPPS, raising concerns around bullying and harassment. I was glad to see that report. Action needs to be taken. Happier workplaces are, in my experience, better workplaces. You often get better performance from people through kindness, support and praise. When we undertake our inspections, we ask practitioners to be open with us about the culture and quality of leadership in their PDUs. And whilst we see effective leaders and supporting working environments in some places, we also have seen examples of toxic cultures. And where we see it, we will call it out. There is also a read across here, I think, to the culture in relation to serious further offences. Last year, we undertook a survey of probation staff who consistently expressed a perception of a blame culture. I think the SFO process should be focused on learning and transparency. We should avoid blaming practitioners who often have too little time and sometimes too little experience and sometimes too little information to identify warning signs. We will continue to do our best. Thank you. We will continue to do our best to highlight unhelpful practices where they're found, with the hope of seeing improvements. Going forward, I've been very clear that the government needs to take a robust look at what the probation service is being asked to do in order to give it the best chance of succeeding. We also need greater local ownership and autonomy. Many of the answers to the problems on the ground will be found locally. They do not lie in London. And responsibility needs to be taken at all levels for improving performance. Local leaders are best placed to join up local services and partnership. The question should always be, how can we better enable probation staff to do their job? Now, when I was appointed Chief Inspector of Probation in the spring of 2024, I had hoped that by now I would have found some signs of improving performance at the sharp end of probation. But if you read my reports, you will see that every probation delivery unit, every region I've inspected, has been rated either requires improvement or inadequate. The driving force behind this assessment has been the public protection scores. In better staffed PDUs, we're seeing some better scores on work to engage people on probation and work on assistance. We've had some areas delivering good or outstanding work, but 2/3 of the cases we've inspected so far have been judged insufficient on public protection. It's very easy for the organisation to say that public protection is the top priority. It's much more difficult in practice. That is not the fault of practitioners. In every inspection, we see a combination of high workloads, constant change, complex processes and inefficient tools, a lack of experience and training. They are all hindering improvements. My judgment as Chief Inspector is I need to take a different approach. I've therefore made the decision to pause the Inspectorate's core adult programme from next week and will be starting the field work for 6 months of dynamic inspection. This work will not be rated. It will be focused solely on the delivery of public protection work across all 12 regions, and it will be accompanied by follow-up activity with regional leaders to identify what more can be done to guide and support this work. Our aim is to help increase knowledge and confidence and to provide a solid foundation for further improvement. We will also share what effective practice looks like from our inspection findings, identifying blockers to progress and highlighting opportunities to improve accountability. If this makes a difference in even a small portion of cases, it will have been worthwhile. However, my hope is that through this programme we can be a catalyst for a step change. It's important to be clear, risk is intrinsic to the work of probation. Sorry, my iPad suddenly jumped and I lost where I was. It cannot be eliminated. With a caseload of nearly 250,000 cases, it is inevitable that things will sometimes go wrong. Probation staff cannot predict the future, nor can they be held accountable if those under their supervision reoffend. The current problems we see at the front line are systemic, and that means there is rarely a place for individual blame. SFOs effectively boil down to chance in very many cases, and the support is not there to help people make better decisions. However, I also believe, through our published evidence, that improved practice will make the public safer and reduce harm to victims. We'll be delivering a package of regional recommendations and highlighting to ministers issues that need attention at a national level. And once we've concluded that work, we will resume our core adult inspection programme. Now, I started by saying thank you, and it would be wrong of me to conclude without again praising the hard work of probation staff every day of the week. I suspect sometimes 7 days a week. Whilst our reports continue to paint a painful picture of the pressures at the front line, a huge amount of good work is taking place. That is why we are now producing effective practice documents for every probation region, identifying probation excellence where our standards are being delivered well. In our new approved premises inspection programme, looking at a different aspect of probation work, we've observed positive work taking place, despite huge underlying risks on staffing that must be addressed or things will go badly wrong. We owe it to the public and the profession to make sure that the service has the money, staff and stability it needs to do the job well. My mission as Chief Inspector is to help get probation back where it used to be. A strong public service, rooted in the local community, delivering positive change. I will do everything I can to support this, including difficult conversations with ministers where needed. I'll be continuing discussions around the sentencing bill and our public protection inspection findings. I cannot be supportive of measures that will set the service up to fail. Realistically, I think we all know we are several years away from getting the service where we want it to be. But I feel strongly that it's my duty as Chief Inspector not to shy away from this focus, but to lean in and do everything I can to drive change. I hope you'll feel able to support my efforts in this and maybe see you again next year. Thank you for listening.